Hello, and welcome again to Historicus Navalis, and part 2 of our comprehensive documentary about the tragic loss of the German LASH carrier Munchen in the North Atlantic in 1978. In the following 30 minutes, we shall pay proper tribute to the unsung heroes who took part in the largest and most daring search operation in maritime history. Then we delve into a wide range of mysteries and raise a number of nagging questions, which remain unanswered until today. It should be noted that these aspects have never been highlighted before, and that makes the whole story even more eerie. Hope you will appreciate our research and reward us with a warm like. If you don't want to miss any of our future documentaries, please subscribe. Thank you.
An exhaustive story of the Munchen sinking would not be complete without the aim to dwell upon those who took part in the search. We believe that it is about time to pay proper tribute to the hundreds of ship and aircraft crews and crisis management teams involved in the operation. Since their action was not crowned with success, people tend to forget them quickly. Hence, our research team would like to take the initiative and set an example to remember the unsung heroes of December 1978. Through years of meticulous research efforts and with resourceful help from internet forums like shipsnostalgia.com, shipspotting.com, and others, Historicus Navalis was able to identify at least 71 ships and compile contemporary photographs accordingly. Actively involved in the search for the Munchen were the Greek bulk carrier Agamemnon, the American container ship American Legacy, the French reefer vessel Aquilon, the British container ship Asia Freighter, the Greek cement carrier Oster, the Panama-flagged reefer vessel Balkan Reefer, the Soviet general cargo ship Belomoskos, the Norwegian chemical tankers Bow Cedar and Bow Gran, the British heavy lift carrier Beacade, the German bulk carrier Buntentor, the Italian tanker Camellia B, the British bulk carrier Carchester, the British general cargo ship City of Colchester, the Panama-flagged general cargo ship Claudia Kogel, the British container ship Columbian Star, the Peruvian bulk carrier Corupuna, the Canadian container ship Voyageur, the Belgian container ship Dart Europe, the Danish reefer vessel Dinoscow, the Danish car carrier Divvy Kattegat, the German bulk carrier Elizabeth Fisser, the British bulk carrier Erskine Bridge, the Liberia-flagged tanker Evelyn, the British bulk carrier Forland, the East German reefer vessel Gewirth, the Panama-flagged general cargo ship Gabriele Kogel, the British chemical tanker Gandara, the British reefer vessel Geest Star, the Greek bulk carrier Hector, the German reefer vessel Horngolf, the Irish bulk carrier Irish Maple, the Indian bulk carrier Jalavihar, the British general cargo ship King George, the British bulk carrier King Richard, the Soviet passenger vessel Maria Yermolova, the Greek bulk carrier Marion, the Singapore-flagged tanker Mediolanum, the Dutch multi-purpose vessel Ned Lloyd Madison, the British tanker Nordic Louisiana, the Norwegian tanker Nyhorn, the Soviet passenger vessel Odessa, the Liberia-flagged bulk carrier or Jupiter, the British reefer vessel Port Caroline, the German bulk carrier Protector, the British cruise liner Queen Elizabeth II, the British survey vessel RSS Shackleton, the Swedish container ship San Francisco, the American container ship Sealand Consumer, the Dutch salvage tug Smit Rotterdam, the Swedish reefer vessels Snowdrift and Snowflake, the French semi-container ship Soufflot, the Norwegian chemical tanker Spinanger, the Greek bulk carrier Starlight, the German bulk carrier Stefaniter, the Liberia-flagged chemical tanker Stolz Sidness, the Panama-flagged tanker Texaco Ohio, the German salvage tug Titan, the Dutch multi-purpose vessel Trident Rotterdam, the British bulk carrier Vancouver Trader, the German bulk carrier Widar, and the 8 ships of Hapag-Lloyd, namely the general cargo ships Bodenstein, Buntenstein, Ingelheim, Sachsenstein, Schwabenstein, the container ships Dusseldorf Express, Rhine Express, and Erlangen. 5 vessels which were on the list published by Hapag-Lloyd could not be identified.
In the final stage of the search operation, some more ships offered their help and joined in. These were the Hapag-Lloyd vessels, Stuttgart Express, Nuremberg Express, Caribia Express, Leverkusen Express, and Ludwigshafen, as well as the tanker Corolla, and the only warship, the Portuguese corvette Baptista de Andrade. Although names of their crews remain untold, the strong personal commitment of all seafarers who took part in the search for the Munchen has earned the recognition it deserves. The same applies to the respective aviators of December 1978. Only a few names could be found by means of a newspaper article about the Munchen sinking. The aircraft crew of one German Breguet Atlantic MPA are herewith mentioned by their names as being exemplary and representative for all those nameless aircraft crews who deserve not to be forgotten. They were Lieutenant Commander Rolf Huber, Commander Michael Sassa, Lieutenant Commander Hanno Fischer, Lieutenant Commander Hans Schaffler, the pilot, Lieutenant Commander Lutz Gassert, and Lieutenant Commander Wolfgang Müder, who later became the Commodore and commanding officer of the German Naval Air Wing 3. At the press conference held on 22 December 1978 at Hapag-Lloyd headquarters in Hamburg, the shipping company's CEO, Hans Jakob Kruse, began his speech with the following statement. I would like to begin by thanking everyone involved in this operation, which is probably one of the largest and most thorough in the history of shipping. Special thanks go to the crews of the more than 100 ships from many nations, the crews of the 13 aircraft deployed by the Federal Republic of Germany, England, the USA, and Portugal, as well as the staff of the British Rescue Coordination Center in Landsend, who excellently coordinated the efforts of all ships, aircraft, and our headquarters, as well as other control centers involved. And, as he continued, he said, the whole thing was an act of international solidarity that we couldn't have imagined to be more effective. However, it is agreed that one man stands out as the incarnation of Herculean courage, unrivaled proficiency, and finest seamanship. We are talking about the master of the Dutch salvage tug Smit Rotterdam, Captain Peter de Nys. Assigned as on-scene coordinator, he commanded the salvage tug during the initial phase of the search and coordinated not only the deployment of participating ships, but also the 9 aircraft in the search area. According to the naval aviators, he accomplished that in such a splendid and clearly fashion, if necessary even in 5 languages, that one pilot denoted him a brilliant bloke.
The official investigation into the vanishing of the Munchen took much longer than expected. First of all, Hapag-Lloyd had all flotsam, including the 3 recovered barges and the damaged lifeboat, thoroughly examined. These objects showed eye-catching grinding marks and deformations which provided valuable clues about the possible movement sequences related to the accident. Of particular interest was the suspension link of the lifeboat. The fixture, made of thick, high-tensile steel, was found considerably deformed in longitudinal direction, an indication that it must have been bent by a tremendous force imposed on the ship from forward, and which had led to the lifeboat being ripped off its stowage position on the davits. Moreover, upon inspecting the recovered barges, experts found that they had slipped down the ship in longitudinal direction, a finding that corroborated the assumption of a great physical force that had hit the vessel more or less directly from ahead the bow. However, in those days there was still a widespread belief that the term monster wave, often used by shipmasters to describe their terrifying encounter with a larger-than-normal ocean wave, was simply seaman's yarn. Scientists, particularly meteorologists who had not the slightest notion of seafaring, dismissed reports of freak waves and dubbed them figments of imagination. Some even used offensive language against mariners. As a consequence, many old salts kept their mouths shut to avoid being made a mockery of themselves. Due to the lack of conclusive explanations for the disappearance of such a large and sturdy ship, the German Maritime Accident Investigation Board, formerly denoted SEAMT, released a statement in which they attributed the sinking to an extraordinary occurrence caused by extremely adverse weather conditions. About 25 years after the tragedy, ocean waves of 30 meters height and more eventually became an undisputed fact. It required sophisticated satellite technology to demonstrate that contemporary reports from shipmasters about freak waves were true and corresponded with real encounters. And the Netherlands Maritime Institute, which was assigned to review the investigation results, confirmed any such wave heights are beyond all nautical experience. At the time the Munchen plunged into disaster, no less than 17 ships had been urged to call a port of refuge due to damages inflicted by huge waves.
So, the questions which remain unanswered until today are the following. Is it justifiable to presume that Captain Dennekamp should have been aware of these dire consequences, or which he should have foreseen by applying due diligence and attention?
Had he retained his chosen course if it was known by him that wave heights of up to 30 meters were raging ahead on his path?
Had he taken the northerly route around Scotland, if it had dawned on him that he would run into the monster of the month, the name given to the storm when all was over?
Why there was no any deviation report sent to Amver after December 9th, a failure that is even more mysterious as the captain was one of the most frequent users of that effective vessel tracking and tracing system.
What were the reasons for the strikingly bad radio signals sent by the Munchen? Already during the QSO chat between the radio officers of the Munchen and the cruise ship Caribe, 3 hours prior to the distress message, the voice communication was garbled due to weak signal strength and frequent interferences. If München's radio antennas had been compromised or damaged already before she ran into distress, her radio officer had certainly mentioned it in the chat with the Caribe.
Can we assume with virtual certainty that it was simply human failure? What about possible shortcomings with respect to the ship's structural integrity? Or was it just an unfortunate series of events which led the ship founder to higher forces?
And why did the radio officer of the bulk carrier, Marion, tried again and again to call the Munchen and only started to relay the SOS signal more than half an hour later, unexplicable enough in a situation where every minute counts? Same applies to the French coastal radio station Arcachon, whose radio operators reacted rather drowsy and commenced broadcasting the SOS not before 4:13 a.m. GMT, namely 1 hour after Munchen's distress message was heard. Valuable time was wasted.
Within a period of 90 minutes, radio operator Sergeant Paul Huber of the U.S. Naval Station Rota in Spain received on December 13th at 7:42 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time a series of 10 distress calls of same content and at equal intervals on the frequency 2182 kHz. Apart from the position and a 3-time transmission of the call sign Delta Echo Alpha Tango, the ship also reported that it had 28 persons on board. Strange enough, the individual radio messages sounded as if they came from a tape recording. From his location 1,000 nautical miles away, the naval operator repeatedly took radio bearings of the transmission source at 298 degrees, therefore roughly hit the distress area in question. As it turned out later, his bearings pointed straight to the center of the plotted disaster area. Sergeant Huber and the experts of Hapag-Lloyd unanimously shared the opinion that these distress calls must have come from the Munchen. But what motivated the investigation board to dismiss their view and judge that the reports most likely did not originate from the ship but from someone else?
The auto alarm signal that was heard for 2 minutes on 17 December 1978, around 6 p.m., GMT on 2182 kHz, could not have come from the Munchen. It is agreed that the vessel sank about 30 hours after the initial SOS message, namely on the 13th of December, between 9 and 11 a.m. GMT. That had been determined after the ship's electronic position indicating radio beacon was found 6 hours before the auto alarm could be heard. But then the question is, who sent the mysterious auto alarm signal?
And finally, the greatest mystery circulates around the wrong distress position sent by Munchen's radio officer Jörg Ernst, the author of the script of this documentary, Captain. Peter Heimstedt was a shipmate of Jorg Ernst and made 2 voyages with him 6 months before the sinking of the Munchen. He remembers him as a diligent person whose prudent attitude earned him great respect of all on board. Less known is the fact that the radio officer had held a degree as a certified technician for electromechanical machinery. His skills, especially in repairs of complex and sophisticated electronic equipment, had made him a great asset of every ship he embarked. According to the radio officer of the Greek bulk carrier Marion, who was the first to receive Munchen's SOS message, the latitude of the distress position was given as 46 degrees 15 minutes north. Upon taking a closer look on the International Morse code, it is noticed that the figures 4 and 6 have an eye-catching similarity. The figure 4 is expressed by the Morse code signal 4 dots and 1 dash, while the figure 6 is depicted by 1 dash and 4 dots. In other words, one signal is the reverse image of the other. It may be agreed that a distress situation can cause even the toughest radio officer to operate the Morse key too fast or somewhat sloppy, so that recipients might have difficulties to read the message. Hence, it can be presumed with medium to high probability that the radio officer of the Marion mistakenly relayed the latitude as 46 degrees instead of 44 degrees north, which would mean the ship sank as far as 120 nautical miles to the south. And that exactly corresponds with the findings of investigators who later plotted and traced back the drift movements of recovered flotsam.
Another obscure episode involves the mystical Soviet vessel named Artemis. It had been reported that at the time the München sent her SOS, this ship was nearest to her distress position. It can be presumed with a probability bordering on certainty that the Soviets were fully aware of what was going on. For sure, the vessel's radio officer had heard the desperate SOS message, but instead of relaying it, the ship disappeared on an easterly course and did not even join the search operation that began shortly thereafter. Even worse, after having been spotted near the Portuguese coast, the ghost ship returned to the area of the disaster once the search was over. In 1978, the Cold War saw an unprecedented arms race between the two superpowers, and political tensions had arrived at a peak. Both sides deployed intelligence surveillance ships, and the Soviets used to disguise common fishing vessels for espionage assignments, so they appeared to be harmless ocean-going trawlers. Among seafarers, the Soviet Okhin class of spy vessels was one of the best-known examples. They were easily distinguished from civilian purposes by their considerable array of aerials and antennas, which they needed for long-range radio communication and guidance of nuclear submarines. In addition, there were also a number of purpose-built support vessels deployed for weapons testing. One of them was the torpedo test ship OC-57 of the Muna class, seen here. Between 1954 and the 1990s, reports of accidental losses of torpedoes emerged occasionally, but that was neither commented nor confirmed by the Soviet Navy. Due to frequent large-scale naval exercises and the enormous dispersal of warships in the North Atlantic during the Cold War, near misses and accidents were inevitable. As far as civilian merchant vessels were involved, such incidents could hardly be denied. While accidents with Soviet warships are still cloaked with an enigmatic screen of secrecy, collisions with U.S. naval vessels are quite well documented. For instance, the clash of the nuclear attack submarine USS Tulleby with the West German general cargo ship Hagen in 1972. Cruising just below the surface in stormy weather 150 nautical miles off the coast of North Carolina, the American submarine collided with the freighter. An Atlantic Fleet spokesman of the U.S. Navy said that the collision had caused only slight damage to the 272-foot submarine, but that the 8,500 tons freighter was taking some water in her number 2 hold. Both vessels radioed that they were en route to port under their own power and did not require assistance.
Back on topic, it should be noted that after the Cold War had come to an end in 1990, a group of German private stakeholders took the initiative, contacted the new government of the Russian Federation and requested to provide insight into the radio logbooks of the Artemis. After a while, the group received a positive response from the Russian authorities, and the respective logbooks were made available to them. To their surprise, it was found that the logbooks appeared rather new. Moreover, they noted that all entries obviously had been written by one single person only, using the same ball pen. In addition, the German group also contacted the American oceanographer Professor Robert Ballard, who discovered the wrecks of RMS Titanic and the German battleship Bismarck. He was asked whether he might be interested in another expedition to locate the wreck of the Munchen. He frankly confirmed that he would very much like to launch a search for the wreck, but surprisingly, he admitted that he had no permission to do that. As it has been said in the opening credits of our documentary, we do not want to speculate. On the other hand, we should not ignore these interesting side issues. Everybody may feel free to draw their own conclusions. It is no secret that installation of the bridge superstructure in the extreme forward part of the ship was controversial and caused particular concern among professionals. In fact, it was a concession to operational constraints and a necessary evil. In high and steep seas, the massive bows sometimes immersed deeply into the waves, so that huge amounts of green water swept over the ship's navigation bridge and boat deck. That had lately occurred on a stormy voyage in January 1974 when house-high waves plummeted over the compass deck, which was 18 meters above the waterline. Fortunately, large-scale damages were not reported. On average, 2 to 3 extremely high waves can be observed in the open ocean every week. That has been discovered only in 2004 by scientists of the DLR German Aerospace Center during the ESA MaxWave project. Within that EU-funded project, radar satellites helped establish the widespread existence of rogue waves, or freak waves, as seafarers call them, and they have been used ever since to study their origins. As a result, it was found that the most frequent buildup of such monster waves occur in the North Atlantic. According to the scientists, the North Atlantic Ocean, similar to the North Pacific, proves to be an ideal area of formation of extraordinary high waves. Even ships with dimensions of supertankers cannot cope with forces generated by freak waves. In order to get out of the way of such monsters right in time, mariners must know where and under which circumstances they develop. About 20 years ago, a number of scientists began to work on computer programs in order to create an early warning system which may serve as some kind of life-saving application. Some systems have been thoroughly tested on ocean-going container vessels ever since. Its purpose is to raise a warning of imminent freak waves, but also to give advice on the ship's optimum course and speed to avoid parametric resonance. Strangely enough, however, it is widely overlooked that shipboard sensor and radar-based information systems can only provide snapshots of actual weather conditions. The accumulated data may delude the officer of the watch into the belief of an accuracy which is not verified by nautical experience and traditional seamanship practice. Thereby, mariners may risk to develop an unrealistic sense of security, which is in turn reflected by an unseamanlike ship handling in heavy seas, as it can be observed frequently. That is definitely unrewarding. More than 2 decades after discovering the reality of freak waves, they are still not explicitly accounted for in Classification Society's rules for ships design. They say there is insufficient knowledge about these waves and ship response, or the probability of ships encountering such waves. When it comes to construction of ocean-going ships, their hull structures are still designed to withstand sea states of up to 15 meters only. But what can happen if even a large container vessel of 100,000 tons displacement accidentally runs into a mediocre freak wave is best illustrated by these photos taken after such encounter in the Gulf of Alaska in December 2014. A live experience of being punched by 5,000 tons of green water on the high seas cannot be put into words. Seafarers who have gone through such an experience are still frustrated, as most people don't seem to comprehend how it affects their well-being, both physically and emotionally. Moreover, naval architects, against better knowledge, continue to develop cargo vessels with accommodation and bridge superstructure in the extreme forward part of the hull. Already in 1995, Lloyd's Marine Information Service started to create a useful database that contains ship accidents due to heavy weather. Searching for clues and assuming that a max wave could be the cause, the wave spectra before and at the time of the accidents provided potential risk indicators, and in fact there are indications that particular combinations of wind, sea, and swell and rapidly changing conditions in the sea state can create dangerous situations for ships of all types and sizes. By all means, common sense would dictate that those sea areas which are prone to freak waves must be subjected to permanent surveillance by satellites, as it was shown by the scientists of the German Aerospace Center. Only such technology has proven to be eligible to weather routing services for early recognition of dangerous trends, evaluation of size and direction of monster waves buildup, and timely broadcasting of navigational warnings to shipping. Of course, a setup of such global freak wave alert system will be costly, even though it may not warrant a 100% safe avoidance of freak waves encounters. However, it will definitely minimize the residual risk of ship and crew because it increases their survivability, and for that alone it should be worth to pave the way towards operation of a global monitoring system for dangerous sea states and extreme waves. Where is a will, there is a way. Maybe the rapid progress in artificial intelligence can offer the ultimate solution in the near future. Who knows?
The remains of the Munchen are just another wreckage at the foot of the mid-Atlantic ridge. Hundreds of ships have found their last resting place there. Most of them are covered with the mist of oblivion. Their crews once embarked on crossing the Atlantic with great hopes, unaware of their fate which awaited them ahead. But today we are asked not to allow that the Munchen soon turns into another anonymous victim of higher forces. Sure, some of us do not really want to know what happened in those horrific morning hours of December 12, 1978. But isn't it this agonizing uncertainty which stimulates reflection among many of us? In fact, we may not change things as they are, and we may not improve technical security if none of us will shed light upon the root cause of this tragedy. In his shaking remarks to the Ramstein Airshow Disaster 1988, German TV correspondent Klaus Bednarz said, "A society which cannot grieve over calamities is condemned to repeat tragic mistakes." Exactly right. And therefore, it is essential to grieve, so that we shall not do the same mistakes again. It is important that we keep this severe and critical event alive in our minds. As the author of the script of our documentary, Captain Peter Heimstedt has a very personal relationship with this tragedy. Lucky him that he narrowly escaped the fate of the Munchen because his friend and shipmate Conrad Schapers embarked and went down with her instead of him, who had been originally scheduled to join the crew on that ill-fated voyage. Dieter Bumble was an excellent chief cook who cheered up everybody with his humorous approach. He is among the best shipmates whom he ever had the pleasure to meet. And Jörg Ernst was by far the most capable radio officer of his active seafaring. We may only guess, but we can firmly believe that he applied all his strength to get the ship's emergency transceiver rigged and send his desperate SOS messages into the air. He has erected himself an eternal memorial in the mind of many. And Captain Dienkamp? Whatever motivated him to choose a southwesterly course, he certainly made this decision upon his best knowledge and belief. Who would raise his voice and in all seriousness accuse him of that? Man is subject to imperfection, and as Leonard Cohen once said, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." This quote reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is still beauty and hope to be found. Now small fowls flew screaming over the yet yawning gulf. A sullen white surf beat against its steep sides. Then all collapsed, and the great shroud of the sea rolled on as it rolled 5,000 years ago.